The Christmas Rebellion, also called the Baptist War, was a slave revolt that began on Christmas Day 1831 with a strike led by Baptist deacon Samuel Sharpe, who was a slave himself. The rebellion lasted for 11 days until it was suppressed in January 1832. It was the largest slave rebellion in the British-occupied Caribbean, as 60,000 out of the total 300,000 slaves were thought to be involved in the uprising. The revolt led to the direct end of legal slavery in the British Empire. Welcome to Black British Hub, where I talk about Black British history and colonial history in the British Empire. Stay tuned by hitting the like and subscribe button. Jamaica was the largest British Caribbean colony, and the enslaved outnumbered whites 12-1. The British slave trade had already been abolished back in 1807, but slavery altogether was yet to be abolished. However, there were already proposed measures to enforce full abolition, but until then, Jamaica's population was overwhelmingly enslaved. In 1801, Samuel Sharpe, the future leader of the Christmas Rebellion, was born in the parish of St. James in a plantation owned by Samuel Sharpe, who was an English lawyer that practiced in Montego Bay. The records of the enslaved Samuel's parents have unfortunately been lost, but he was black and thus born into slavery. There is not much said about his early life, but he was baptized and taught himself to read, using newspapers and books, and learned how to write. He became a Baptist deacon and leader of the congregation of the Birchell Baptist Church. He was nicknamed Daddy due to his leadership qualities. As the British allowed slaves to hold religious meetings, Sharpe used this rule to preach about freedom and the wrongs of slavery. It is said he amazed people with the power and passion of his speech. As the British Parliament was discussing the abolition of slavery, Sharpe would read the local and foreign newspapers following the arguments, and he would make his congregation aware of the latest news of those arguments. Because of his position, he was granted limited freedom to move around the island. He used this freedom, especially travelling on a traditional holiday or on a religious service, to discuss and plan the actual revolt. This was after he mistakenly believed that freedom had already been granted to Jamaica's enslaved people by the British Parliament, and that planters refused to abide by the law. He was also inspired by the growing abolitionist movement in London, so he led a plan for a peaceful general strike to start on Christmas Day 1831. At the end of a regular prayer meeting in mid-December, Sharpe and a selected group of leaders would discuss the plans of the revolt. Samuel rallied his followers by reflecting on past examples of rebellions, such as the Demerara slave revolt in Guyana. He then had them swear on the Bible on the plan that was outlined. On Christmas Day, the leaders of the uprising went on strike, demanding for a working wage and free time. However, the plantation owners refused to meet their demands, and a full-scale rebellion broke out on December 27th on the Kensington estate near Montego Bay. Sugarcane fields were set on fire, and whites fled to Montego Bay and other towns. The rebellion featured a militia group called the Black Regiment, led by a slave only known as Colonel Johnson. This regiment clashed with local colonial militia forces led by Colonel William Grignon, who had been recently appointed by Jamaica's governor to suppress the revolt and force the slaves back to work. Grignon was also a landowner of multiple estates, including one at Salt Spring, where a series of incidents in December were sparks of the uprising. The Black Regiment defeated a local militia unit on the 28th, and it retreated to Montego Bay. The enslaved were armed with guns and ammunition. The regiment invaded a number of estates, urging enslaved people to join them. They took control of the rural areas of the parish of St. James. On December 31st, the colonial authorities declared martial law. Sir Willoughby Cotton of the British Army enlisted the Jamaican Maroons of Akopong Town to fight against Sharpe's followers. Even though the Maroons were descended from escaped slaves, they formed an alliance with the colonial government to quote-unquote protect their community. At first, the Maroons were not so successful. They attacked the rebels at Katadupa, but had to retreat because the rebels were too strong. However, they managed to defeat the rebels in a second attack and also kill Sharpe's deputy, Campbell. When Cotton's regular troops were attacked by a large rebel army at Maroon Town, the Akopong Maroons attacked the rebels, capturing many, including another of Sharpe's deputies, Dehany. A smaller black militia unit, consisting of 150 slaves, attacked another colonial militia unit in the far western part of the island, but were defeated. 25 rebels and 1 white militiaman were killed in that conflict. The Black Regiment near Montego Bay were ultimately defeated, and the rebellion ended on January 5, 1832, especially after the Windward Maroons from Charlestown and Moortown had heard of the news and decided to fight for Cotton. The remaining slaves, led by Robert Gardner, surrendered after learning that the Windward Maroons had been sent to finish them off. Whilst 14 Europeans were killed, more than 200 slaves were killed during the revolt. A further 300 plus slaves who were captured were executed by colonial authorities. Samuel Sharpe was captured himself, tried, convicted, and sentenced to death. In the months leading up to his execution in jail, he had several meetings with Reverend Henry Bleby, a missionary. Bleby said that Sharpe told him, "I would rather die upon yonder gallows than live my life in slavery." He was hanged on May 23, 1832. Although the rebellion itself was suppressed, that and the government response are believed to have contributed to the passing of the Slavery Abolition Act 1833 and the final abolition of slavery in the British Empire in 1838. In 1975, the Samuel Sharpe Teachers College was founded in his honour in Granville, a suburb in Montego Bay. Samuel Sharpe was proclaimed as a national hero of Jamaica on March 31, 1982, and his image is on the $50 Jamaican banknote. There is a memorial dedicated to him with a statue of him and other leaders in Montego Bay. We've reached the end of the video and I hoped you learned something new. All the sources will be listed in the description. Please make sure to like and subscribe for more videos like this.